Invite all of you to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item of business on the agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting held February 11th and the minutes of the special city council meeting held March 4th, 2020. Is there anyone in the audience or anyone in the council that wishes to make any changes or corrections to the minutes of those two meetings? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for their approval.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes of the regular council meeting held February 11th, 2020, and a special council meeting held March 4th, 2020. Discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. The consent agenda is before the council, and all items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered separately in its normal sequence on the agenda. And I know we want to make a couple of changes. We want to delete item 6G completely off the agenda. That's going to be deferred to another meeting. And also we want to remove item 9F from the consent agenda. Is there anyone else in the audience or any other members of the council that want to remove or add any items to the consent agenda other than deleting 6G and taking 9F off the consent agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval with those two changes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Turn it over to Matt. Matt, do you want to take item 4B, please?
4B, Northwest Water Carnival Co-Admirals Maddie Henningsen and Annette Korth to appear before the council. Consideration of the request for the 85th annual Northwest Water Carnival events scheduled July 10th through the 19th, 2020. I believe they're with us, and if you'd like to address anything you have on the schedule for this year.
Thank you for having us here. I'm Annette Korth. I'm one of the admirals. Mandy Henningsen. We're just really excited. We made our band announcements on Friday. We're going to have our first female headliner, and it's actually a huge hit. We were a little concerned, being never done it before, but we've had great ticket sales already, and we're excited to bring them in, along with our staples, the water fights and the bed races, bingo, all the events that everyone's excited to see every year at Water Carnival.
Excellent. The Public Works looked at this, along with the new Public Works Director, Sean. We make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve all the various permits, street closings, use of public facilities, etc., so we can have the 85th annual Water Carnival.
Thank you. We do appreciate everything.
One question.
Yeah, Jay.
Who's the female headliner?
We have Terry Clark coming.
Nice.
And she's from Canada, so I've already sold tickets from Canada, so we'll be bringing in some Canadians as well.
That's a smart move. Good job. So we have a motion and a second to approve all those permits and uses and street closings, etc. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck. We always look forward to the Water Carnival. It's a great event, and it means summer's coming, right?
That's right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
So as long as you're there and on TV, the headliner for the second night is?
Clay Walker.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
We're replacing WeFest.
Without objection, I would like to move forward and take up item 5C, please. And I know Alderman Sherman wants to.
I'm going to abstain from this conversation.
Abstain and excuse yourself from the.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead, Dan.
Well, item 5C is consideration of a resolution to approve a conditional use permit to allow the conversion of residential properties to a 10-unit planned unit development in the Shoreline District at 1106 to 1110 Westlake Drive and 1390 County Road 6. And the reason Jay left is this is his property, and he's doing the development.
Right.
So the Planning Commission reviewed this and actually unanimously recommended approval with a couple of conditions, and the CDC reviewed it yesterday and modified those conditions somewhat, and the paper's in front of you on it. Resolution number 2020. And I don't know if you want me to go through all of the conditions here, but we tweaked it. But we found that the conditional use permit just made a lot of sense. You know, if you recall, a couple of meetings ago, I think it was, there was a request for a 21-unit development here, which would have required a rezoning. It would be a pretty intensive use for this property. This 10-unit development makes a lot more sense. The units are spread out across 3.2 acres. So I think it's appropriate at this point to make a resolution based, or a motion based on both the Planning Commission and the CDC recommendations that we approve this conditional use permit.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I know there's some folks in the audience that may want to ask questions or speak to the issue, and so now would be the appropriate time. I know, Tom, you wanted to ask a question or make a comment, you can certainly do so. And if you would, just identify yourself and give us your address for our minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Trowbridge. I live at 1092 Villa Lane. And I think my main comment to it is, you know, I understand the plan unit development and then it gets processed as a conditional use permit. But my question is that on the process for it, I think variances are required because it's not complying with the zoning that's listed. So a PUD has to have certain criteria that it follows, and one of those would be the number of boat slips. And I think the number of units that's in the first tier. I'm not entirely sure if the parking space, in its existing parking space, but that may require a variance just because it's within the 150% of the setback. So I think those are things that it requires a variance, that you can't just approve some of it as a condition in a conditional use permit, because the conditions really should actually be restrictions that are not covered by zoning. The PUD relaxes zoning standards, but it still has a few standards that it won't relax, or that it has, and this doesn't comply with some of those zoning standards. And I guess that's my question, is why it wouldn't be required to have a few variances.
And I'm going to call on our city staff to field that question, Tom. So either Larry or Kelsey or both of you want to.
Our ordinance does allow these types of developments to be approved without additional variances, and this is a standard operating for ordinances of this type, not just for Detroit Lakes, but for other communities as well. And Section 18 of our zoning ordinance, which deals with the shoreland district, talks about conversions and allowing PUDs. And it says proposed conversions must be evaluated using the same procedures for residential PUDs involving new construction. Inconsistencies between existing features of the development and those standards must be identified. So while you have to identify any of these inconsistencies, for example, in a new PUD, you're limited to the number of slips that would be the same as the number of units that are allowed in the first tier. In this case, that would be 2.77. We would typically round that up to 3. However, since those docks are existing and have been approved under previous conditional use permits for up to 10 slips on that site, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the PUD with the 10 slips.
Okay. Is that mic working?
I think it's.
Well, we're getting back feed, but
Well, she was monkeying with it up here.
I don't think it's working.
Did everybody hear? Tom, were you able to hear that? Okay. Does that answer your question, or?
I guess I still think, so the zoning ordinance where it talks about the PUDs, in section F of that zoning ordinance is where it has some design criteria that apply to a PUD. So it's in, there's other zoning standards that the PUD avoids, but it says that these conditions are allowed as long as you follow the design criteria, and so it'd be subdivision 10F. And that's where it has the boat slips, and it talks a little bit about the additional setback for parking areas. And so that's a zoning that the PUD is supposed to follow. And that's why I think it needed a variance from that section. So it would be a PUD that also would require some variances.
Larry?
Our interpretation of the way that the PUD and conditional use permit process runs is that they're not required to have separate variances to be granted.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments that anyone wishes to make? And Dave, if you would introduce yourself and your address for the records, please.
First, let me get my glasses on.
It's a good thing you brought Judy.
Hello, I'm David Stoneman. I reside at 1366 South Shore Drive. My wife and I own the property that's adjacent to this property that's proposed for a conditional use permit. I have two requests. First, it took 2.5 to 3 years of study, and the city ordinance was passed allowing 2.77 slips for this project. I believe that city council members should live by the same rules imposed upon everybody else. Secondly, the application comes before the city based upon representations that are not accurate. I ask that the application be denied in its entirety, and I will explain that as I go forward. My comments tonight will focus on the number of boat slips allowed. I believe that Detroit Lakes has become one huge marina, and the problem is greater than this one 10-slip marina. However, we have to deal with the issues that come before the city council, and we're here tonight on one issue. First, I ask, what is the question that's driving this issue that comes before the council? The applicant has riparian rights, but he does not own the lake. They don't own the bottom of the lake. They don't own the lake surface. They never purchased the lake. They don't pay taxes on the lake. The public owns the lake. What the applicant is seeking is a windfall by selling rights to the lake that he does not own, and I believe that that is not a valid basis for a variance. First, let me deal with the procedure. A variance, I believe, is required for enlargement of an ordinance. The applicant has requested a conditional use permit. If you want boats slips that are in excess of those allowed by the ordinance, there must be a variance, and there's a difference between a variance and a conditional use permit. A conditional use permit is issued to grant a special use when the general and specific ordinances have been met by the applicant. A conditional use permit is different from a variance because with a permit, the owner is allowed to use his property in a way that the ordinance expressly permits. A variance allows the owner to use the property in a way that is otherwise forbidden by the ordinance. The applicant is trying to sneak in the back door by what he could not do through the front door. the city's planning office seems to be going along with this proposal. Before I go forward, I'm going to pass out some photographs, and these are the same photographs that I passed out at the Planning Commission meeting. I probably don't have enough, but I'd ask those in the Planning Commission if you could share them. Would it be all right if I bring them up and
Absolutely, yeah.
The applicant is misstating the number of docks that were used in the past. The staff report states, the applicant is requesting that there be allowed 10 boat slips that currently exist on this property. And this is not very large, but just to show you, this is the staff report, and I'm referring to the first page. It reads, the applicant is requesting that they be allowed the 10 boat slips that currently exist on this property. If you look through the photographs, you'll see that there's never been anywhere close to 10 boat slips on that property. I've lived there, we've had our office there for over 30 years. That is just not an accurate representation of what the situation is. Now, at the Planning Commission, I pointed out that those representations are inaccurate. And after I did that, there was a representative of the applicant that followed me, and then he said, we never represented that there were 10 boat slips on the property. Now, after he made those comments, that should have ended the conversation, because if there are not 10 boat slips to convert, then you can't do the process that you're talking about, because as Mr. Remen just explained, you have to have a similar situation and you're converting it, and there were not any boat slips nearing 10 on the property, so there's no conversion. Well, following that, a high-level city employee came to the applicant's rescue. He stated that the property had been approved for 10 boat slips. He stated that this took place when a conditional use permit was granted for short-term rental property. Now, I had attended the hearing on that conditional use permit for short-term rental property. We never talked about 10 boat slips at that public hearing. I went back and I found the notice that I received, and there wasn't anything in the notice that talked about 10 boat slips. I read the minutes from that public hearing, and there was no discussion in the minutes about 10 boat slips. The public hearing was closed, and a recommendation was forwarded to the City Council following that Planning Commission hearing, and there was a recommendation. And the recommendations were to limit one of the properties to 2 docks, and the other property a limitation of 3 boat slips. If you recall, probably you won't, but back in July, you got a packet before your July meeting. And this is what I'm referring to. For one of the properties, that says the property be limited to 2 docks, and the other property be limited to 3 boat slips. Now, 3 boat slips is consistent with the city ordinance. According to the city ordinance, you're allowed 2.77 slips on the property. To deviate from the city ordinance, public notices must follow by public hearings, and all of that is required if you're going to deviate from that. No notices went out. There weren't any public hearings. And then out of nowhere, there was a recommendation made to the city council to deviate from the ordinance. The city council passed a resolution adopting a conditional use permit granting permission for short-term rentals. The resolution limited one property to 2 docks, and the other property was limited to 6 boat slips. And what I've done is I've copied the records from your minutes of your July meeting, and it's that the property be limited to 2 docks, and the other property be limited to the existing 6 boat slips as of July 9, 2019. And there was never an approval on the conditional use permit for 10 boat slips. Now, at the Planning Commission, a high-level city employee indicated that the Planning Commission, that there had been an approval for 10 boat slips. That representation was not accurate. The application that is before the City Council tonight purports to have the signature of Jay Sherman. The petition states, "These properties are currently permitted for up to 10 boat slips, and we are asking for no additional boat slips or docks." And what I've done is enlarged the portion of the application from Mr. Sherman's application, and it reads, "These properties are currently permitted for up to 10 boat slips, and we are asking for no additional slips or docks." That's not an accurate statement. The Planning Commission based its decision upon representations that are not accurate. The recommendations before the City Council tonight are based upon recommendations that are not accurate. The truth matters. A person should not profit from their own wrongdoing. The petition should be dismissed in its entirety. The application should be started afresh and based upon accurate representations. Next week, your constituents will read about your vote in the paper. Your constituents will learn that the staff report provided that the applicant is requesting that they be allowed 10 boat slips that currently exist at the property. Your constituents will learn that at the Planning Commission, one of the representatives stood up and said that there never was a representation that there were 10 boat slips. And the constituents are going to learn that these inconsistent statements just simply do not pass the smell test. Constituents will learn that the application states these properties are currently permitted for up to 10 boat slips, and we are asking for no additional slips or docks. But the public will learn that the representation is not accurate. Constituents will say that this does not pass the smell test. Constituents will learn that the Planning Commission recommended limitations of 2 docks for one property and 3 boat slips for the other property. The citizens will learn that to increase the number of boat slips beyond that allowed by the ordinance, there must be notice and hearings. Citizens will learn that the procedure was not followed. Citizens will learn that City Council voted to increase the number of boat slips to 6. They will learn that the property was never approved for 10 boat slips. Without 10 boat slips approved, the council does not have authority to approve the measure that's before them. I'm suggesting that that does not pass the smell test. There were many inaccurate representations, and I think the truth matters. And I believe that the appropriate thing to do is to start the process over based upon accurate representation. So let me finish where I started. I have a request. The first is that it took 2.5 to 3 years to study the city ordinances, and it was passed. And that city ordinances limits the use of this property to 2.77 boat slips for the project. I believe that city council members should live by the rules that were imposed upon all other citizens. Second, the application that comes before the city council tonight is based upon representations that are not accurate. I suggest that the application be not denied in its entirety, and if they want, start the process over using representations that are in fact accurate. And I have one other postscript. Mr. Sherman was elected from the 3rd Ward, and I asked whether or not that is an accurate representation. I have reason to believe that he lives on East Shore Drive, which, to the best of my knowledge, is in Ward 2. He might say, who cares? Well, constituents from the 3rd Ward may question whether or not their elected representative is providing adequate representation for the ward in this matter. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Dave? Again, if you'd state your name and address for the record.
Okay.
Thanks.
Dave Nyson, resident of Detroit Lakes, 1175 Village Lane. A few questions that arise in my mind, and I did go through several of these at the Planning Commission. First of all, I fully support Mr. Sherman and the direction he's heading with this project. When we look at it, we've got Mr. Remen, city planner, who has analyzed this from one end to the other. We've got Apex Engineering, who has done a lot of work on this project, Meadowland Survey, who have also done a lot of work on this project. They're all three professionals that this is what they do. Mr. Stoneman has made this suggestion that because Mr. Sherman is on the council, he's bringing this in through the back door. I would fully, number one, a statement should not even be made in front of this council with that representation. He's also stating that Mr. Sherman is looking at a major windfall by this project. He potentially could get a windfall, or he could potentially do great damage to his financial well-being along with his family. I should have stated in the beginning, I spent 17 years as a city planner for the city of Perham. My background is also construction. I know the ups and downs of construction. I've built several spec houses, won in some cases, lost in others. So it's not just an automatic windfall. There again, I'll reiterate, Mr. Sherman, I believe, is following the process as any other citizen would be doing. So I believe it's a direct attempt to slam not only Mr. Sherman, but the council, the city council, the city of Detroit Lakes, by bringing out several of the insinuations. To try and close here, I am also the owner, broker of the real estate company of Detroit Lakes. Planned unit developments are in high demand. They bring growth, they bring tax dollars to the city of Detroit Lakes. I also own my home. If I sound a little jittery, I was up half the night flying back from Florida today. I own my home in Florida. I live in a gated planned unit development. That brings tax dollars to them, as long as what it could potentially do to the Detroit Lakes area. To me, and this is probably a statement I shouldn't make, but what it boils down to is so many times people are, well, I have what I have, and no one else should be allowed to have what they want. In closing, I guess the one question I do have for the council, Mr. Stoneman is running a commercial business in residential district. He does not live there. It's not a in-home business, a daycare, something of that nature. So I had a question why that would be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else want to speak to the, Scott, introduce, please?
Scott Walls with Meadowland Surveying, speaking on behalf of Jay Sherman. First, Jay has made it clear to me, and I think to the entire city staff when he started this application, that he wanted no preferential treatment. This had nothing to do with him being a councilman. It was a gentleman owning a property and trying to develop it. So the implication that there was some sort of preferential treatment, some sort of backdoor anything, is, in Mr. Stoneman's word, inaccurate. And as far as, I was the one that made the comment that there may not have been 10 boats out there. I don't believe there was. I don't know if there is or has been 10 boats out there. The representation is that from our understanding of the resolutions that were passed for that property for the 2 short-term rentals, that it was permitted for 10 units. And let me explain that. The triplex was permitted per the city resolution for 6 slips, specifically saying 6 slips. That's clearly 2 slips per unit. The duplex says that it is permitted for 2 docks. So we called the city staff and asked, was that intended to be the same thing, 2 slips per unit or 2 slips per dock? And they said yes, that was what they believed the intent was. So we filled out our application based on that. Again, not trying to misrepresent anything, going off of the two city resolutions, City Resolution 2019-0709D and 0709C. If it wasn't 10 slips, I guess I'd like to know what the two docks were for, but there was clearly 6 slips for the triplex and then 2 docks for the duplex. I guess other than that, if you have any other questions regarding the application, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Does anyone in the council have any questions for Scott as he's representing Mr. Sherman? Any questions?
I would like to point out that Mr. Sherman's application included those 2 resolutions for the conditional use permit, and the discussion that Scott Walls explained was what was discussed by the Planning Commission, so they perfectly understood that 6 slips were approved and 2 docks on the other unit for, as the interpretation was, a total of 10 units. So I don't believe that there was any inaccuracy in the representation of that at the Planning Commission.
Okay. Discussion by the council. We do have a motion and a second, I believe, on the table, right?
Yes.
So there's a motion to approve, and it's been seconded. Discussion by the council?
I've got a question for Larry on the vacation rentals. I don't remember seeing where it said that vacation rentals are allowed so many slips of their, I don't remember reading that in there.
That's not in the ordinance, but that was a condition that the Planning Commission put on it, because typically residential units like that are not limited in the number of slips or docks that they can have. And so the Planning Commission was saying, if you're going to do this short-term rental, we are going to limit the number of units that you, or number of docks or slips that you can have on the lake.
The reason I bring that up, Larry, is because we just went through this whole shoreline ordinance, and part of that was to take care so we don't have the whole lake looking dock after dock after dock. We don't even want to have docks down by J&K and down. If they don't pay their fees, the docks are going to be gone. Now we're saying we can put 10, and that's where I'm having a hard time coming in on this. And another area that I'm having a hard time understanding is we're saying that they can bring vehicles down to park on the long side of the road. And I was listening to John Pratt saying when we do get this Westlake Drive done, that we're going to be widening the bike trail and narrowing the road. I don't know where these vehicles are going to be able to park on the housing side, and I don't know where all this is going to fit in. And so explain that to me.
The Planning Commission made a condition that they not be allowed to park on the property on the lakeside of Westlake Drive.
I understand
So that would mean that if they have any parking down there, it would have to be on the other side of the road, not on the road, but unless there's parking permitted on the road. But then they would have to have parking down on that side of their property.
But where would that, I'm going to ask John, where would that space come from of where narrowing the street and all this up? Where would they put those?
They would put those on their own property. They would put parking spaces on the property like they have there now.
So you're saying these units that are behind,
If they don't walk down, if they choose to drive down,
That's what I'm
they would
talking
have
about.
to park in whatever available parking has been made available on the property.
so they'll actually have ownership of that land that's next to the road too, then? That's all part of their ownership then?
Wherever their property line is outside of the public road right of way.
Okay. Scott, did you want to add something to that?
I think I can answer Mr. Zeman's question. There's an existing, in front of the triplex, there's an existing parking area there right now that can park up to 4 cars. The way Jay's got it designed is there's going to be a path that comes down from the top down to that parking lot. That's the parking area that's intended for people that are going to use the lakefront. So it could be 4 full cars. The path is for golf carts and things of that nature. Per one of the conditions of the recommendation for approval, no motorized vehicles of any sort, golf carts, 4-wheelers, vehicles, or anything can go on the lakeside. So anything motorized would have to stay in that parking area that's outside of the road right away, but in front of that triplex. So yes, the project as a whole owns that land, and that parking area is the area that's intended for people to park when they go into the lake.
Now, Larry, I'm going back to what Mr. Stomo showed on these pieces of paper, going back to these different ordinances and our statements. I'm a little wondering back and forth too on some of this stuff, because some of it kind of contradicts each other on this.
Well, I have not had a chance to look over the information that he has. If there is some inaccuracies in the minutes or a typographical error, I don't know that. I haven't looked at the information. All I can tell you is that the discussion at the Planning Commission during that public hearing was 2 slips per unit for 6 slips, and that's what was passed by the city council.
Well,
So I don't
I'm
know
just
where
wondering
this other
because
information is
of,
coming from, and this is not a public hearing.
well, Mr. Stolman showed a lot of information here, and I'm just wondering if we shouldn't hold off on this till you have a chance to look through on some of this.
Okay, further comments from the council or questions? Go ahead,
I
Matt.
guess 2
Yeah.
questions. Mr. Wenner, you mentioned that there was some discrepancy between the planning and the CDC.
Only that a couple of conditions were tweaked.
Okay.
So in the sense that one of them, for example, was to make sure that there, if you look at the conditions on this, that no motorized vehicles be allowed to park on the lakeside.
Okay.
That's one that we've talked about.
Yep.
Including golf carts again and so
Gotcha.
forth. So there is a clarification that parking for the planned unit development individual units was by the units themselves. I'm trying to remember what else was, what else was added here, Larry? It was just
Okay.
small stuff, but there was no controversy about it. You remember,
They couldn't
Madeline?
they couldn't rent,
boat slips.
the owner couldn't rent a boat slip out
Yeah.
to somebody else.
Gotcha.
They could only be used by ownership.
Yeah, and that's in here too, cannot be leased to anyone else, so.
And then condition 5 was also amended because we typically say that the project be constructed as shown on the approved site plan, but they needed an exemption or an exception that for utility installation, some building sizes and locations may change. Any changes are subject to approval of the planning commission.
We just wanted to make sure, and it got down to a point where if building dimensions were going to, the total square footage of a building were going to change, even though, if the square footage was going to stay the same, but the dimensions, outside dimensions were going to change, we even wanted to see that come back to the Planning Commission, because we've run into some issues with that. So there's a site plan here that needs to be followed too, as part of the conditional use permit, so.
And I feel like on that part, Dan, that if it goes back to the planning commission, whatever they do, it should also come back to the council then too. I think it should go all the way through on it. Should have a final step with the council on it. Because this thing is kind of getting almost out of hand in some ways with all the different questions. There's too many questions that are not being answered.
You know, I gotta say, I gotta jump. I don't think any of the questions are outstanding at this point. I mean, the resolutions are plain as day as to what was passed. I don't have any problem. I don't feel there's any inconsistencies. It's been through planning and CDC. All the questions have been answered. I'm good with this. I want to move forward. I'm sorry, Kelsey, if you're gonna just jump in.
Well, I think Mayor and Council, the question, there have been instances before where we have approved a site plan, and if the site plan is tweaked a little bit, we brought it back to Planning Commission for approval. That has been done before. That has been past practice, and previous projects, we've done it that way, so.
It has, but this is different than normal. This is, I would say, getting out of normal with all the things that have been brought up here, and I really do think we should be looking at some of that.
Jamie, did you have something?
You know, I feel that it might be beneficial to have the city attorney's office just look this over and just defer action for a month.
Okay, further discussion?
I guess,
Go ahead, Dan.
I remember when we approved the original conditional use for the short-term rental, and we did have a conversation quite a bit about the dock slip situation and whether or not, you know, it's going to be, what is the intention of a single dock? And there was conversation of a single dock, you can have a boat on either side of the dock. So 2 docks, boat on either side, that's 4 slips, technically. Then on the other side, we talked about, you can see in one of these images, I believe it's on the second page, we're showing, you can count 4 boats in the middle image on the second page, and then there's a dock section on the, it would be basically the northeast side, I guess, of that dock. So it was a pontoon, a fishing boat, another boat, and then there's a spot for another boat. So I think based upon the information that we had, it looks like we had 2 docks with 2 slips up one on either side, and then it looks as though in the image here, 1, 2, 3, 4 existing plus 1, that gets to be 10. It equals the number of rental units times 2, and it was a conversation that we did have. It wasn't something that necessarily happened at the Planning Commission. I don't know. I wasn't at the Planning Commission meeting. I was at the CDC meeting, and I was at the council meeting. That's kind of where I'm at with the dock situation. As a whole, yes, I think we need to address something about the number of docks and slips and all of that stuff. I guess carrying this forward, I'm not sure this is the situation where we put our foot down, maybe, I don't know. But that's something that we did have a conversation about.
Madeline.
And I also think, I recall that as well, Dan, but I also think in that conversation, we talked about the fact that we don't tell existing ownership on the lake, you have 2 docks out there, we don't tell them, you can only have 4 slips there, because if you drive around, I work enough with Let's Go Fishing, and I'm out on that lake enough to go around and know that there's lots of owners on the lake that have up to 4 or 5 slips on their docks. So I think if we're going to start looking at that, then we're going to have to weigh, what do we tell people about how many slips can you have on a dock? I mean, if you're going to start looking at that, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we'll have to look at current ownership and how many each one of those people have on their slips. I mean, I have a dock and I have 2 slips on my one dock.
Well, and I agree with you on that because, this was brought up with Lake Detroiters when this new ordinance was passed about having docks and slips and so forth on it. And maybe Dick Heacock could address it, but there was discussion about having a limit how many we could put on this. But it's almost like we're going to have docks every place, and by the time you put all those in, and all the pontoons with all the legs, it's just almost overkill. That's what we're going to have on this.
Okay.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay, any further discussion? I think we've heard pretty much the whole situation, so.
Can I just make a quick response?
Is it something new, Dave?
Well, the comment was made, we're going to tell people how many slips they can have. Well, yeah. You have an ordinance. You took 2 or 3 years to develop it, and you're telling people, here's how many slips you can have. And you've told these people they can have 3 slips. Now, somebody else might have it, and I agree that we should enforce all of ordinances all the way around. But you do have an ordinance. You did tell them. And when I talked about coming through the back door, what you can't do through the front, we had a hearing on a conditional use permit to whether or not there could be short-term rentals. And out of that, somebody fashions some theory that you can increase the number of boat slips when you're talking about whether you can have short-term rentals. You do have an ordinance. It took you a long time to develop it, and I think you should enforce it, and that's what we're asking.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to call the question. Motion and second is on the table. The motion is to approve. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstention.
Okay, well, I'm going to do a roll call then. Dan?
Aye.
Natalie?
Aye.
Matt?
Nay.
Madeline?
Aye.
Ron?
No.
Dan?
Aye.
And an abstain, the motion passes. Thank you for your comments and for your attendance tonight. We appreciate it. Without objection, I would like to move to item, what was that? That was item 5C?
Yes.
I'd like to move to item 5E if we can, Dan.
Okay, 5E is consideration to second reading and adoption of ordinance 461, amending the zoning ordinance relative definitions related to garages and accessory structures. This is regarding houses. We discussed this at the last council meeting. We talked about it last night at CDC, only briefly. We didn't have any changes we recommended from the first reading, so the recommendation was to go ahead and have the second reading of this ordinance and then adopt it. I so move.
Second.
So no changes are proposed for the second?
No changes.
So Dave or Scott, did you have questions about this particular?
Again, Dave Nyson, 1175 Village Lane. So I didn't catch all your conversation. The no changes means we're taking out the 1,400 square foot?
Yep. That was, that was changed at the last council meeting, so that's out of there. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I have nothing else unless there's questions.
Just the percentage of what can be storage is still in there, so.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott, did you have something you wanted to bring up regarding this?
I don't know. I wish I would have been at the planning commission so I could have done this at the right time, I guess. My question is what the intent is. It's from what I understand is to get rid of the houses. Is it the look of those buildings, or is it that you just want to have more living quarters than garage space? I mean, is that what the intent is?
The intent was to keep garages as an accessory use on residential properties instead of them being the principal use and then the house being an afterthought.
Okay. My only thought being is a lot of these houses could be built exactly the same way. Basically a pole barn style steel sided building, have the 65% living space, 35% garage, and it'll look like the exact same building. So I was just making sure it wasn't, you're trying to shape the look of what these houses look like, but it's to make sure that the principal use is for residential. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Did we have a motion?
I made the motion, but I don't know if there was a second.
Seconded.
Oh, okay.
Motion's been made and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I don't think there's anyone else here that wants anything moved, right? And so if that is the case, I'll go back and we'll adjourn the regular meeting and open up a public hearing to receive public comments on the matter of amending cigarette sales ordinance. Kelsey, do you want to address this? Give us an overview of this one?
Mayor and council, this is a pretty straightforward amendment. Basically, we're just changing one word in the current ordinance, and that's the definition of a minor. We're taking out 18 years and replacing it with 21 years to be consistent with the new federal regulations requiring tobacco sales to be to people 21 and older. And since this is a change to our tobacco ordinance, it requires a public hearing.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to the issue of amending ordinance 460 regarding cigarette sales? And I don't think anyone's here, so that public hearing's closed, and I would entertain a motion to give first reading.
Okay, there's consideration to the first reading of ordinance number 460, ordinance amending the City of Detroit Lake City Code, Chapter 604.04 minors. Committee recommends, and I so move.
Motion's been made and seconded to give first reading to ordinance 460, amending the City of Detroit Lakes City Code regarding cigarette sales. Discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries, and first reading is given. We'll take it up for the second reading in April. And so with that, I think we're down to the Community Development Committee agenda. Dan?
That would be me again.
There you go.
So item A is discussion. We didn't have anything to bring forward at this time. Item B is
I've got a comment on A there.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much comment on this 2-mile zone, and right now it's been in committee, but I think it might be time that the entire city council gets to weigh in on this, because this is going to affect the development of the entire city for years to come with this, and if there's a way we could get together as a full council and look into this, I think it's very much needed.
Ron, I'm going to have a discussion with Kelsey probably when you guys get back from St. Paul, and we're going to talk about maybe doing just that, so.
Okay, all right, okay.
We just leave it at that for now.
All right, okay.
So no other action for tonight?
nothing tonight. No, I think it's a good idea too to get together on it, so. Okay, item B is a request of Sauk River Estates for a certification of occupancy for 2184 Shady Lane at Golden Bay Shores. That was handed out tonight. It's basically if somebody wants to buy one of the houses there, but there were conditions that have been put on the completion of that already last year as a requirement of extending one of the variances, I think. Anyway, they weren't able to complete all of those because the fall was so wet. So in granting this certificate of occupancy for this particular house, we've recapped some of the conditions and added a couple of new ones. But basically, again, all building code items need to be completed. There's a safety rail that needs to be put on top of a retaining wall. Dirt work needs to be completed, complete turf establishment, and in order to make sure all of this is done, require $15,000 be put in escrow to be used as a penalty if the work isn't completed by June 15th. So with that, the CDC recommended approval of this certificate of occupancy, and I so move.
Second it.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the request of Sauk River Estates for a certificate of occupancy for 2184 Shady Lane, subject to all the conditions that were outlined on the handout this evening. Discussion on the motion?
Mayor, if I could.
Yep.
Looking at this, it's 2184 and 2186, but we're only looking or concerned with 2184, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries.
Okay, figure out where we're at here. Conditional. There's item D is conditional use permit there already is a conditional use permit for a short-term rental at 928 Westlake Drive. There's a condition in there that actually we can't put on, which is to sign off on allowing the right-of-way to go through by that property for the new Westlake Drive that we're proposing. So we want to amend the resolution to bring it in compliance with what we're allowed to do and just take that off. So again, CDC recommended approval of that, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve a resolution amending the conditional use permit at 928 Westlake Drive. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Item F is second reading and adoption of ordinance 462, which amends the zoning ordinance on, shoreland mitigation requirements for conforming riparian lots. It basically clarifies the ordinance as to what's required in that lot when you're doing mitigation. We talked about it at the last city council meeting, passed it. No changes recommended to that. CDC recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to give second reading and adopt ordinance 462, which amends the zoning ordinance relative to section 18, the shoreland mitigation requirements for conforming riparian lots. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second reading is given and ordinance 462 is adopted. Anything else, Dan?
I think I've taken up enough meeting, Your Honor, so let's move on.
Yeah, I think you took up the bulk of it, actually. We will move to the Public Works Committee, and I believe Alderman Volkey, are you taking this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Item 6A, discussion on Washington Avenue, South Street improvements. We had a discussion following up the public comment meeting that we had on March 4th. I believe more discussion will be coming next month with the report from Apex Engineering. Correct. Is that correct? So no action there.
Okay.
6B, discussion on the proposed dock ordinance changes. Further discussion on that. I believe the further hearings will be coming in upcoming months. So no action on that one.
Okay.
Item 6C is consideration to the site host agreement with Zeph Energy. If you all recall, we passed the ordinance back last fall about the electric charging stations just south of Jimmy John's there in the public city lot. This was a boilerplate agreement to keep moving forward that our city attorney and city staff drafted. Kelsey, any additions there?
The city council has reviewed this kind of the placement and discussion about the electric vehicle charging station before, so this is just formalizing the actual agreement now that we have basically had legal review it and council to consider.
So the Public Works approved this, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the site host agreement with ZEF Energy, and that has to do with the electrical vehicle charging stations that'll be located in Detroit Lakes. Discussion on the motion? Just one question, is it still going to be 4 stations, or how does it work? Can you have 4 cars and plug into one deal, or how does that work? Vernell,
yeah, I believe
give us some electrical
we have to
info
have
here.
room for 2 DC fast charging and 2 level 2 charging stations, and expandable to 6 total. So it actually might be 3, 3, and 3, but this first phase is 3 or 4 stalls.
Just in case I decide to grab an electric car next week.
You buy your Tesla next week, get a place charging.
Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 6D is consideration of the request from the Shriners Club to reduce the arena fee for the Shrine Circus coming up. This was discussed at Public Works. We're going to find happy ground for a 1-year extension to make this $680 per staff recommendation. Public Works reviewed, and I so approve.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to reduce the arena fee for the Shrine Circus this year, and that amount would be $680.
Correct.
Discussion on the motion?
I just want to say that, every year in August, we come up with our city budget, and the fees for these type of events is based on the time that our staff puts in on them. And that's where we come up with these prices. And while some people may think they're high, it's the actual cost of what it costs our city staff to do this. So we're going to give them a one-time break here, but I think we somehow have got to work out so that we just don't, every year we seem to keep forgiving all this, and it ends up going back to the taxpayers. And they shouldn't have to be paying for putting on these events, as far as I'm concerned. And I just think we have to somehow get the word out better so that we're not, every time things go around, we're discounted, because this is our actual charges on these for having these events, even the Shrine Circus.
So in response to that, when we talk to the Shrine Circus folks, are we going to tell them that be prepared next year to pay the going rate?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Item 6E, consideration of the request from the Lake Region Builders Association to reduce the arena fee for the Home and Sports Show. Here again, this is a staff recommendation to meet in the middle for a 1-year extension of $2,720. Public Works recommends approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the request from the Lake Region Builders Association for a reduced fee of $2,720 for the arena rental for this year. And again, we would be notifying them that next year they can expect to pay the regular rate. Discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
That's all, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And the finance, Madeline.
Yes, item A, consideration to the request from the Boys and Girls Club to add an additional funding of $10,000. Since they built the new building, they've come up against some pretty drastic increases in their utility bills, and one thing that has occurred is because the new building has to be under their name because of the tax credit financing, we no longer as a city insure that building. We used to insure the old building, and that cost was roughly $9,500 to $10,000 that we were putting out every year to insure their old building. And now we're going to use that money that we're no longer expending on the city insurance to help subsidize their insurance. So the Finance Committee looked at that and agrees, and we so move.
Second it.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the request of the Boys and Girls Club to increase the amount that we are chipping in on the utilities to $20,000 instead of $10,000. But it's a net
Exactly.
wash to the city because of the insurance situation that you explained, right?
Yep.
Further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. I think that's it.
That is it for
Okay,
finance.
we'll go to public safety.
Okay, first item is A, we had discussion on the massage therapist ordinance, so the staff will be working between now and our next meeting to come up with an ordinance for licensing for such establishments. Any other comments you have on that, Kelsey, at this time?
No, Mayor and Council, Public Safety reviewed a draft of the ordinance. The plan is to send out notices to those that, to the best of our knowledge, perform those services in town, to give them notification that the first reading and hearing will be at the April 14th
Publish
City Council
those
meeting.
in the legals too, right?
We will, yep.
Okay. Next item is B. It's consideration to approve a solicitation for bids for the brand-new police department. We've done a lot of work on this, and we're at that point. And Kelsey, you want to kind of give a little update on that?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, several staff members sat through what was called a page flip last week. We literally went through the plans page by page. They're probably about 95% done. There's a few things that they still need to tweak, but we expect by the end of the week we're ready to have an advertisement and get the notice out for that. Bid opening is?
March 26th.
That's the
Bid meeting, yeah.
bid meeting, and then the bid opening is?
April 9th.
April 9th.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
At 2 p.m.
So basically what we're looking for is council action to approve the advertisement for bids.
Okay, the committee recommends, and I so move.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded to go out for bids for the new police department. Discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, next item is C, and it's doing a little advertising for the fire department. They're going to have an open house for the township annual meeting and the city council annual meeting, and they're just going to show us what they're doing over at the police department and what's new and what's old, and give us the complete update, and you're all invited to come. It's going to be at 6 o'clock. They're going to have a small lunch for us, but it's really good information that's going to come on out of it. We've got a new fire chief now, and he wants to tell us about how the department is doing down there, so make sure that you mark that on your calendar, and please show up for that.
Carrie, will you send out an email to all the council members?
We all got a postcard.
Oh, I didn't get a card?
You all should have a postcard in your mailbox.
Oh.
I never got a card.
We have to check our mailboxes.
If you need assistance, I can show you where those are.
Ryan, anything else you want to say about that?
No, just make sure I got a head count so I have enough food for you guys, so nobody has to go hungry.
I've only been around for a few years, but I didn't know I had a mailbox.
It's new.
It's new.
Where are they?
By the copy machines.
Okay.
We all have to go check
Can't
our
wait to go
mailboxes.
look, see if I got anything in there besides
You might
that
even
card.
have a fancy new name tag.
Right. Okay, thanks, Ron. Anything else?
That's all you got.
Mr. Zeman?
Yes.
Chief, is there something coming up from the fire hall too that the public may want to know about? The stag?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So we're having our annual fire department gun raffle. That'll be at the armory. So that's coming up not this Saturday, but next Saturday. So there are still tickets available, so if anybody wants a ticket, I probably should have hit most of you guys up for that. So get your ticket if you need one. If not, if anybody in the public has seen this, they can contact any firefighter or myself, and we can obviously help you find a ticket. It's normally a good event. Let's have a good time.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Ron?
That's all, Chairman.
Chief Todd, anything that you have to bring before the council? Okay.
Sure.
Then we'll move to the liquor gambling control, Dan.
Item 9A is consideration to the request of the Detroit Lakes Post-Prom Committee for a cash sponsorship for post-prom. We're going to stay in line with what we've done the last several years and recommend $200 donation for a sponsorship for post-prom, and I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the request from the Detroit Lakes Post-Prom Committee for a cash donation of $200 from the liquor fund. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Dan?
Yes, item 9F, we took off the consent.
Oh, that's right.
agenda.
Yep.
So item 9F, we just need to make some corrections yes, in terms of location and dates. So this is now the approval of a gambling application for the Detroit Lakes Jaycees to hold a raffle at the Home Center on April 4th, 2020. And we reviewed it at the Liquor and Gambling Committee, and I so move.
Second.
On April 4th?
Yes.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve a gambling application for the Detroit Lakes Jaycees to be held at the Detroit Lakes Community and Cultural Center on April 4th, 2020. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I probably should have mentioned this at the Finance Committee, but Pam Slifka, after 9 years, is leaving us for retirement. And so we hate to see you go, Pam, but we wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the city council having the faith in me to give me the opportunity to come on board 9 years ago. And it's been a treat to watch the city grow and flourish and be a part of that in the background.
I was on the committee that recommended hiring you, so.
Thank
good
you.
job. Okay, anything else that anyone has regarding the agenda this evening? Anything from the Public Utilities Commission, Madeline?
Nothing.
Okay, City Administration. There are some announcements and information. The Detroit Lakes Fire Banquet is the 24th, or the 21st, which Chief Swanson mentioned. Also, the Becker County Assessor has notified the city that we will have the board review for the 2019 assessments on April 28th. And I believe I'm required to go to that. And who did we normally have, the Finance Committee?
We appointed
Ron and
Jamie and
Mark Sirkson, Josephson, Zeman, and you.
And I'm supposed to go, right?
And I may not be able to attend this year. There's something I've got pending, but I'll let you know about that next week.
Very good. The joint governance meetings are listed, and the council meeting dates are listed. Does anyone on the city staff have anything else that we need to discuss this evening? And we all have met Sean, our new Public Works Director, right?
We did that last month, right?
And Sean will be, you'll have your first water carnival. Okay, anything else, Dan?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Jay, your item was approved, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, but.
Thank you.
Okay. Natalie? Matt?
No, sir.
Madeline?
Just an extra thank you to Pam. I've been on Finance Committee, and I've chaired Finance Committee, and I've gone to lots of budget meetings over the last 9 years that she's been here, and she has done a marvelous job for this city and saved the city an enormous amount of money with her quick ability to check where interest rates are and keep us current on that. Thank you.
It's a good thing we didn't have her on commission, right?
I would have retired a while ago.
Ron?
Well, I just want to say too that I talked to somebody that worked with her in the railroad and said, you've got a real crackerjack there and a hard worker, and he was right on the button. She's done one great job for us. We're lucky to have had you.
Thanks.
Dan? No. Jamie?
Same thing, thanks to Pam, and we hope to thank her a little bit more extensively at some future date here, so we won't get off that.
Yeah, stick around to train in the new person, will you? Okay. The business of this council has come to a conclusion. The meeting's adjourned.